Hello and welcome back to your Semester 1 Algebra 1 final review. As a reminder, each of these problems might be in a different order every year, but I'm much too lazy to re-record them. So sometimes you might see a different problem number up here than what the problem number is on your review packet, or the problem might be slightly different. Who knows, maybe this one is like a short answer, but it's a free response, or it's a multiple choice on here. Doesn't really matter. As long as the problem looks similar enough, and I'll take the time to adjust the problem number on YouTube so it does actually match up, you should be good to go. So let's take a look. This is problem 1 for this year, and they're asking us how could we solve this equation. And the nice part is they just want the first step. So the first step is just what are we allowed to do? And we might as well just take a look at the first step for all 5 options here. And we're just going to go one by one. So the first option is we have, how should I do this? Let's do this down below. That way we can see what we're doing here. So let's take option 1, which is up here. And it says, are we allowed to take this 1/2 that's outside the x plus 3, and we're trying to make this equal to 2/3, and are we allowed to distribute the 1/2 inside? Well, I'm pretty sure we're all comfortable with that. In fact, I bet most of you would probably do that as your first step. Get 1/2 x, what's half of 3? I think it's 1.5 equals 2/3. All of those seem like valid math steps, so yeah, that's a good one. Nothing wrong with that. And maybe we'll keep it circled. It worked out. Okay, option 2. 2 says, cool, start over. What if you had the problem 1/2 x plus 3 equals 2/3? Are we allowed to subtract 3 from both sides of the equation? Now, this is worded, I think, not great because you can subtract 3. However, what I think they're trying to say is are we allowed to subtract 3 to cancel out the 3 on the inside? Basically, can I do 3 minus 3 to make 0? In fact, you wouldn't surprise you too much because we always try to undo addition and subtraction first. Well, in fact, we can't do this because currently this entire inside is locked in the parentheses. And we can't do anything to the inside numbers, the numbers in the parentheses, until we get rid of the 1/2 out front. So if the steps aren't getting rid of the 1/2 out front first, if they're trying to do something to the 3 or the x, it's probably the wrong step. You are not allowed to do that. And so 2 is definitely a no-go. All right, let's take a look at 3. Option 3 says, okay, you had 1/2 times x plus 3 equals 2/3. Are we allowed to multiply by the reciprocal of 1/2? Well, they are doing it to both sides of the equation, so that seems pretty good. What is the reciprocal of 1/2? That's hopefully thinking, oh yeah, it's the flipped over version, it's 2/1, or you could just write 2 instead of 2/1 if you wanted. Are we allowed to do that? Well, yes, we are. Because there's nothing else multiplying here. Technically, we're doing 2/1 times all of this, but there's nothing else multiplying, so it is going to cancel out everything here and leave us with probably the nicer x plus 3, and then 2/1, that's going to give us 4/3, and we're looking okay. That's great. There's nothing wrong with that. It actually makes it easier to isolate x, so I'd say that's a pretty good step. All right, but what about number 4? Option 4 says, well, we still have this pesky 1/2 that we need to get rid of, either by distributing like 1, reciprocal like 3, but could we go through and divide by 1/2? Now, this is something we don't see very often with fractions, but it is valid. 1/2 is multiplying by parentheses. To get rid of that, I could absolutely divide by 1/2. Those will cancel and leave us with x plus 3. So that is okay as a first step, but does anybody see why that might not be a great first step? And the reason is because when you divide by 1/2 over here, now you have a fraction within a fraction, which is fine. We can deal with it. We might even remember that to divide fractions, we keep the first the same, we flip the second one over, and then we multiply straight across, and that's okay. But this step right here tends to confuse a lot of people, so we usually don't teach dividing, but it is fine. That is allowed to be done, and it does simplify the inside. And in fact, if you multiply your fractions here, you'll actually see we get the same thing as option 3, so that looks pretty darn good. All right, and then we get to our last one. And our last one, step 5, says, could we take this 1/2 times x plus 3, which is equal to 2/3, and could we distribute the 2/3 to the left side of the equation? And I really hope at this point in algebra you think, wow, that's just silly. Why would we be able to take a number on one side of the equal sign and distribute it to the other side? You cannot do that. That is also a no-go. Sad face here. This one will also not work. And so that leaves us with 1, 3, and 4.